Officer, do you remember your first? Do you remember your first? I always will. The first death investigation that stopped you from sleeping. The one that stuck with you longer than it should. That left you feeling unresolved. I certainly do. I never even made it to the scene. My first involvement was the autopsy. And I just remember she was so young and so small. When they wheeled her from the walk-in and unzipped the body bag, the tire marks across her chest immediately jumped out. Dark black geometric patterns across light-colored skin. Like out of a cartoon. They were so perfect it seemed artificial. A setup. A spoof of what it would look like to be run over. These memories are nearly 20 years old by now. Which ironically is older than she was when she died. She looked so fragile. Small in stature. Thin. With an odd lack of obvious trauma. No large abrasions. No deep cuts. No exposed fat or muscle. No blood on her body at all. But a perfect set of tire impressions running from her left shoulder to her right hip. Some other black marks, be it from tires, asphalt, or the undercarriage of a car here and there. The most upsetting part of this whole story is never being able to explain what happened. All we can do is speculate, hypothesize, and offer conjecture. On a weekday morning like any other, she got ready to head to her college classes. 19 years old, and the world laid out at her feet. After having breakfast, she grabbed her bag and told her mom, "I love you." Her mother replied something to the effect of, "I love you too, be safe." Less than 10 minutes later, strangers were knocking on mom's door, and her daughter was dead in the driveway. There were 2 garbage bins at the curb. A homemade skateboarding ramp was in the street. Her car was in gear, running, and pressed against a landscaping boulder in the yard. And she was lying in the driveway, no longer alive. I want to say that the call kicked out as a collision, or maybe a hit and run, with vague details of a female being struck by a vehicle. We spent a long time trying to make sense of it. From the best we could figure, she said goodbye to her mother, walked into the garage and started her car. As she was backing down the driveway, she saw a homemade skateboard ramp blocking the road at the end of the driveway. She attempted to place the car in park, in order exit and move the ramp, but she likely placed it in reverse instead. As she simultaneously opened the driver's door, took her foot off the brake, and moved to exit the vehicle, the car started to move backward. With at least one of her feet on the ground, and the motion of the car catching her by surprise, she falls backward. The majority of her body is outside of the car, but her right arm is on the floorboard, trapped in the angle created between the open door and the frame. Panicking now, perhaps already having parts of her lower body run over by the driver's side front tire, she tries to apply the brakes with her right hand. Except she misses, and hits the accelerator instead. The vehicle lurches backward, the steering wheel turning, until the vehicle makes a series of at least 3 circles, running her small frame over again, and again, eventually crushing the life out of her. On the last completed lap, the back of the car strikes a landscaping bounder, which is enough to stop its movement. Eventually, a neighbor or passerby finds her lifeless body on the ground and calls for help. There is no rhyme nor reason to why and how people die, nor is there why some cases set up shop in my memories and refuse to move out. But I clearly remember this case. I remember how it kept me up at night, how it made me question the why part of dying, and how the lack of a concrete conclusion and explanation ate away at me. Hers was the first funeral I attended for a work-related incident. I was hoping that would provide closure for me. But obviously, writing this nearly 20 years later proves that it didn't. I think about her frequently, not weekly, but several times a year. I wonder how her parents moved on. Wonder how her older sister is doing. I'm curious how it affected the family dynamic. Did the parents accept the explanation we provided? Or do they stay up at night trying to answer the unanswerable? Why her? Why then? A 19-year-old girl, with the world in her hands. Bright, energetic, and ready to set off on her own. But the whys are never explained. I just remember that she looked so small, and that being killed by a machine seemed so unfair. Unfortunately she was my first, but not my last.